What's up, COD fans? Good to see you guys back. I hold shift live from Atlanta after day number 1. We'll skip the pleasantries in the intro because we've got a lot of games to talk about, 8 of them to be exact. And of course, we'll be going through the pools, pool by pool. So we'll start things off with the first one up in Group A. Starting things off at the very top, London versus Florida up first. So what would happen here? Would London prove to be consistent, or would Florida show that the couple of weeks that they had away would be enough for them to get some work done? We'll start things off on Petro. Rated had a huge hot start for London. Havoc was more than double negative to start, and let's be honest, when that happens and you fall by more than 100 points, the map will most likely not go in your way. It would not for Florida, a 251-13 for London. Gunrunner would be the search and destroy, and I'll be completely honest, okay, someone had a bad performance map 1, you shrug it off, you come back for map number 2, but the entire team of Florida just looked a little bit lost. Dylan was finding easy space, completely uncontested, Wuskin getting value sniping on offense with really not much contest whatsoever. A 6-1 goes to London. You're starting to think that, goodness, Florida, they're not ready to play this week. Here's the deal. We got Petro for the domination. Neither team had played this specific map yet for domination, and it was honestly a great first half from Florida. Frosty and Skies had a big map. Florida will survive through to find themselves in a map 4 after a 151-132 goes their way. It'd be a Zero Cave up next, and this is my biggest thing with Florida. I was talking about how if Skies and Mox could stay on double ARs, maybe they would be able to find a way to start to battle up against Rated and Wuskin. The problem was, Pristini was ego-challing everything this side of the Mississippi, and then also a little bit more on the other side as well. He started off 9-20, Frosty was 9-13, and Havoc was 9-19 after the first rotation. As every dog in the world likes to say, woof. London would take this one really without much of a problem. 251-26, a 3-1 for them there. They would get past Florida, send them to the losers bracket. Now we'll go to Atlanta versus OGLA. Now, I know a lot of people were very high on the fact that, well, OGLA, they came in, and Nameless said it on the contestant the point. Now, he was saying, well, there was a patch that happened. We really can't take what they did 3 weeks ago at full value. I was a little bit more skeptical because there were a lot of issues outside of just the domination that I was concerned with OGLA. But going into a very strong Atlanta team, could they find any success here? Slasher came out with the second M4, as you would have expected, and that was one of the things that I thought maybe needed a change for OGLA, was maybe they need to run 2 ARs more often than not. The problem was, after one rotation, TJ, who was the worst performer, period, in Minnesota, started off 5-21. Yep. ATL flexed their rotation and break game hard on this Optic team. And this was, again, the Optic team that played Paris on this map, and it was completely sloppy. They didn't look any better this week. 251-21 in that one. And then you got, well, Azir Cave. You go to Arklov Peak, Atlanta FaZe, Search and Destroy. It's just poetry in motion. 6-3. Let's not even bother talking about it. Petro domination coming up next. Atlanta flipped the C flag so fast after spawning on the A side. Optic Gaming would never get it back. 162-143. We'll go into the winner's bracket match here first. Atlanta would go up against London. Atlanta, they would spawn Hackney Yard on the favored side, but the biggest thing was they had a very, very clean break on the second rotation of P2. That one would essentially be the difference maker, as Atlanta actually swapped to a double AR setup by the end, which you're going to see that a lot come up over the next couple of days, I imagine. It was a 251-95 for ATL there. Again, you go to Arklov Peak. This is their favorite map. They look pretty nasty on it. It's just, it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. It's like looking at a sunset being painted by Bob Ross. We love that. Sniper battle definitely made things interesting for a bit, though, as London was able to take 3 rounds. But again, Atlanta just too good. 6-3 the score there. We'd go back to Petro domination. And again, this London team, they lost to Florida previously on this Petro dom. So would they be able to clean things up? A lot of the first half was actually just a battle for the C flag, and Atlanta never looked like they could fully get themselves set up, let alone their feet underneath them at any given point in time. A great map there for London. Good corrections, 146-132 they take. Again, the only map losses that we've seen from this Atlanta team have been domination. New York did it in Minneapolis, and then you had London do it here. Kind of frame up essentially what I'm getting at. They didn't lose another map from here on out. 251-89 when it came to the Gunrunner. Atlanta just too many great break setups. Cellium absolutely fried off though, and it makes you wonder, after you get Cellium down from having a 7 or 8 spree, how do you deal with Simp right behind that? The answer is they didn't. It was a great showcasing for Atlanta. Just kind of wish the crowd would also have a good showcase as well. Sad Panda Bear. Let's go over to the other pool though. Pardon me, we got to talk about OGLA in Florida. And now, okay, some of you guys had OGLA in very high regard, Kevin. But coming into this one, again, I was so nervous about this OGLA squad. They did not look very good against Atlanta. Okay, sure, they played up against Atlanta. This is a Florida team you feel like they have to beat, right? I mean, Florida did not look very good against London. This is a game that they should absolutely win. And well, JCap would come out, been consistent so far all year that we've seen him. He would pop off on the first Ramaza hardpoint. OGLA, my goodness, they looked so much better. They were getting setups, they were fast rotating, they were turning scrap into initial time, which on Ramaza, pretty hard to do. And the problem for me was I was looking at this and I'm sitting here watching Mox play with an MP5 after he was the main role AR for this team at Minnesota. What's going on here? Because Skies was playing a little bit too aggressive for an AR, and Mox, he only had 27 total engagements on the map as an MP5 player. I was really nervous about that. Going into the Arklov peak, how about this one? Florida, again, just not winning gunfights all over the place. Not even playing for trades. Pristini, ego challenge all day today. Looked really, really bad. As they were down at one point, 5-2, they started to turn a couple of first bloods into W's. Sent it to around 11. Havoc, just like he did in the opening of it, would pop off for 3 kills in the round to win the round 11 and sneak away with a 6-5 win on Arklov. Then we'd go to the Petro Dom. Florida gets a flip from the A's to C side very early on when it comes to the first half. And from there on out, they couldn't really kind of figure out where they wanted to go. A couple of weird plays towards A, a couple of weird plays towards B, pretty even halves. Mox Sky would actually roll swap again, as Mox, after he was getting shut down left and right, would pick up an M4 late in this game and instantly found 4 kills with it. And Florida started to pick up some momentum, but they were still down and would come down to the last handful of seconds to determine who would win the map. And well, you just got to see it for yourself if you missed it live.
Could it potentially take over for Florida? All they have to do now is defend B with their lives. 143, 142, it will take the tie. 144, 144, Optic Gaming, they assault B, but there's no time or is there? Florida steal, they steal, but no, draw.
Welcome to the new game, the new year, Ben. This is what happens.
Wait.
And I don't know what the decision needs to be. We've seen it online where you get the 1-point tick, but the game just doesn't count it.
Here's the good news. All of you guys that just had flashbacks to the Atlanta FaZe, or not the Atlanta FaZe, the FaZe versus Luminosity at London. The good news is they finally got this one right. Rightfully so, 146-145. The game gets called in favor of Florida, who now snuck away with essentially 3 rounds in a row in the search and destroy, would sneak back into this one to put themselves in a comeback fashion on Petro. It would come out to Hackney Yard for the hard point. And how about this? Skies and Mox, they say, we both like ARs. We're both going to use them. This is the Florida that I want to see more often than not. Optic Gaming was not able to match up against the long-range pressure, although it was a very closely tight game. The fact of the matter was Florida was up by a pretty decent hefty margin where they could essentially choose how they wanted to win the game. It came down to a P5 break where they only needed 8 seconds worth of time, forced Optic Gaming to break. They did, but then they only had 4 seconds to break from P5 to P4. They wouldn't. Florida takes the series and Optic Gaming goes home with no series wins still. Hate to say I told you so. Well, you know where the rest of that phrase goes. I told you so. This Optic Gaming team has a lot of things to work on, flat out. And honestly, I think I see TJ probably getting put onto the bench. Bring in Chino, put him on main AR. Let Slasher do Slasher things. Let Dashy do Dashy things with MP5s or MP4s, or MP4s, M4s if they want to go with the double AR setup. But get Chino in. Get somebody who's solid with an AR. Let the other guys run around because TJ's not getting it done. And Quavo, well, I'm not going to bring up in conversation yet, but that conversation might be coming in the near future. Let's go to Group B. Minnesota versus Paris was the first one up. I was excited about this one. I had it going 5, and most specifically, I was very excited to see if Minnesota would do the proper thing and make sure that they banned out everything that had to do with Gunrunner domination. That's where Paris has won all of their dominations, totaling amount of 5 of them. They needed to ban that one away if they wanted to have a chance. And well, I will tell you, just spoiler, they did ban that away. But this is how the set went. Back and forth game in the Gunrunner hardpoint to start. Paris would break one more time, though, than Minnesota would. And that would be all the game would come down to, 250-211. Then we would go to Petro. It would be a 2-for-2 start. Minnesota, though, would just manage the new clock a little bit better than Paris did. And it would be a 6-3 win for Minnesota. Hackney Yard, domination. You're happy about this if you're Minnesota because you're 2-0 on the map and you looked good in it the first 2 times when you were at your home. So could they potentially do that again? The answer would be very definitively yes. They would dominate the first half and then absolutely outpace Paris 195-123. Goodness gracious. Going to Azir Cave then. Map number 4, I'll just give it to you. 250, 206. Very good looks here from Minnesota. Again, this Paris team did not look terrible, but Minnesota looks like, again, that consistent 5 that I saw at Minneapolis came back again. Alex had a couple of slow moments, but he mimicked it up with having great moments as well. Asim was extremely solid. Silly, GodRx, incredible. Assault, as consistent as you could ever want. Chicago, Toronto. I told you at the beginning of the day when it came to predictions, don't even bother tuning into this one. Chicago's going to take a 3-0. It was worth tuning into, but not for the greatest of reasons. We'd start things off on Hackney Yard for the hard point. Bance would still be starting here for Toronto. Keep that in mind that he came in for medals. He would also lead this one up. Toronto had a very hot first rotation, but then they just decided they wanted to just run right at Arcidy's AR, where he had a couple different lives of 7+ kills, and that would be enough for Chicago to flip the momentum and the lead while growing the differential in the second rotation of Hills. They'd take it 250 to 203. 34 and 16 for Arcidy's by the end. A hot start for him. Piccadilly, search and destroy. You felt good about Chicago and their search and destroy after London. Didn't show up here today. Toronto absolutely read them like a book. It was a 6-1. Looney went essentially unopposed with the sniper rifle, and Toronto would find first blood in 5 of the first 6 rounds, where they would go up 5-0, and then, of course, take it 6-1. Petro domination. Again, this is where Chicago has been good. Has been in the respawn specifically. Well, let's be honest. This one, near picture perfect for Chicago. Methods, he was 15 and 6 at one point in time. Really needs some help on the respawn end specifically, but Chicago was just too dominant. No chance for Toronto. 204, 114. Map 4, Classic and Bance. Huge heroic moments to hold on to a lot of scrap time, break hills, hold off hits. It was a great start for them. Toronto would start up 60+ points, and that would be too much for Chicago to come back to overcome. 250, 162 to Toronto. We're going game 5. No, I thought this would be a 3-0. Just as surprised as you already hear me say that. The good news for Chicago fans is Scump went 10-0. Before he eventually fell in the 5th round. It would eventually go round 11. Bance would nearly have the heroics to 1v3 to deny a plant over by the A-bomb site and expire the clock, but Arcidy's finds the trade at the end. Chicago survives, literally definition of, in round 11, a 3-2 scoreline there. Winners bracket, Chicago, Minnesota. We got ourselves a good one on this one, you would think. Again, Minnesota looked really, really strong in their performance. They would start off extremely strong on the Petro hardpoint. Arcidy's, who had essentially dragged the Chicago team through the dirt in the first set of hardpoints in their first match, well, the only thing he dragged in this set was ass, because he did not play very well. Everyone from Minnesota was playing absolutely hot, but GodRx, again, out of his mind, this time with the combination of Alex and Asim. 250, 107. For Minnesota, a great start for them on Petro, but that would be just about that. Arcidy's realizing he had a bad set. He would come back, play extremely well in the search and destroy. A 7-0 start for him through 3 rounds. Minnesota would bounce back for a couple of rounds every so often, but Arcidy's would finish 13-4 in the 6-3 win for Chicago on Gunrunner. Hackney Yard, domination. Minnesota likes this map. Do you feel like this could very well go to a 4th map with them in the lead, or potentially a map 5 if they trade back and forth? You would have thought that until Envoy came up and said, no, I'll take this one from here, boys. Envoy was at 17-7 in the first half. Scump at 17-9, while Silly, on the other half, was 5-15. Not a good first half for them. A tough fight for Minnesota to try to bring things back, but GodRx would be handed the L after going 30-15. 153-145. Chicago wins going into the map 4. Gunrunner, near dead even first rotation. Arcidy's, though, again, picking things up. 21-11. It was all gas pedal from there. 250-189. Chicago move into the playoff bracket. Minnesota will have to face up and try to get their way qualified early tomorrow. Paris versus Toronto. The winner of this one would play up against Minnesota. And this one I thought for sure was going to go maybe a little bit more in a little bit flavorful fashion, as Toronto had a couple of great moments. Paris also equally playing just as well. And it was a dead even game, even though Cammy had an explosive start for Toronto on the Gunrunner hardpoint. The problem was Paris just was not getting themselves set up at any given point, keep having to fight themselves back into the map from a deficit, and as the time went on, it came a little bit too late. Classic would have 40 kills, and Toronto would win 250-182. We'd go to Gunrunner now for the search and destroy. Toronto, Paris, we know that they like to get first bloods and then not follow up on them. Someone's got to be able to get first bloods and follow up from here, you would think. Toronto would take the advantage in the first blood game and playing at a much faster tempo, I thought, than Paris would, keeping them on the back foot just a touch. But down 5-3, Paris would be able to kind of string together a couple heroic rounds and send it to round 11, where they would be able to clutch things up in, again, number of odd man situations, where they were able to take round 11 6-5. And that was one that Toronto will absolutely want to get back if you look at the rest of how this one goes. Going into the Petrodome, a lot of Petrodome today. Paris was just handling Toronto nonstop on map positioning. Easy, early flip on the A to C side, 40-point lead after the half. Toronto just never able to get things going from there, 169 to 122. We'd go to Azir Cave, a pivotal map 4, where again, a very even first rotation would come through for both of our teams. A very even game. Toronto having a tough time getting setups and breaks, though initially they started to make a go of it in the second rotation of Hills, but the problem was they weren't quite able to hold on to the P2 spawns going into the third rotation, so they had to break through P1, also break through the spawns to P2. Paris, with a little bit of a cushion, were able to just soak up free time and take the win 250 to 209. So again, going into it for tomorrow, it's going to be a nice four-man bracket. The possibility of both Atlanta and Chicago playing up against each other in the finals is, I won't say imminent, but definitely possible. We still have to see who else is going to come out of the loser side of the bracket from both of these pools to get through. It's Florida playing up against London. I just don't like Florida in the matchup, flat out. London is looking much better than Florida currently is. There were a couple of heroic moments, but the flat out matter is that you got Pristini Eagle channeling everything in the world. Unless they slow down and find themselves some kind of an identity, I got London taking this one pretty easily and getting out of the group in Group A. In Group B, you've got Minnesota going up against Paris, a rematch from the first time. However, I don't think the results are going to change unless Paris comes out playing at their all-time best with all 5 players participating, because Minnesota has showed that all 5 players are playing very consistently almost at every single moment of any single game. So I feel like Minnesota's going to keep the edge on that one. If you're a betting fan, maybe you feel a little bit differently, but I think you're going to be looking at this one with the same kind of favor. Again, I still like Atlanta. Chicago, scary moments versus Toronto, a couple of scary moments versus Minnesota. Atlanta has been on cruise control so far. I don't see it changing. The finals likely still going to be Chicago going up against Atlanta. Things can change. Things can be wild. Maybe Chicago drops a map somewhere in there, or maybe even the series. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be Chicago, Atlanta, and I still hold on to what I had before. Atlanta going to take this one probably around 3-1. I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta loses the Dom again to Chicago. They've been playing very well there. But the search and destroy is just flawless from Atlanta, flat out. That's what I got for you guys. Long video, but wanted to dig through it for you. Hopefully you enjoyed. We'll get you guys for the final day recap tomorrow night. And until then, hope you guys keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.